So both GM exercises 1.3 and 1.4, the goal is to really introduce you to an idea that's going to be thread throughout this book and throughout this course, and is a key idea in systemic functional linguistics, which is that meaning and form are intimately tied together, they're inseparable, and that they're also intertwined with culture and also inseparable from culture. And culture in the sense that we have um, different types of texts that we create for different reasons. And some of those we've analyzed and we could explain why we do something. And some things have just existed so long and been passed down from generation to generation, we may not even think about anymore why we do something or even realize that we do something because it just seems so much a part of our normal, which is very much what culture is. It's just very much what's my normal is my culture in a sense. Okay, so that said, exercise 1.3 gives you 3 small text fragments. And think about text maybe broader than you have before. So a text isn't necessarily only something that's been written down. It's also spoken language as well. And I would say even spread to multimodal ways of expressing. So it's not just text and speech. It's a wide variety of expressions or ways of expressing meaning to one another. So let's look at these 3. The first one, and they lived happily ever after. So this sounds very much like a Western fairy tale, right? So a Western style fairy tale. And so you can think through then, what's a purpose for writing these? Western style fairy tales have been around for quite a while now, right? Since at least the medieval period. This particular genre. Well, why? Why did people start writing these down? Why do people continue to share these and to read these? So one idea could be the idea of passing on cultural ideas and cultural beliefs. Could be for entertainment, simply. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. You could go on. There's lots of other possible directions this could go in to think through why it is that people tell fairy tales. You could also think through, well, how does this particular phrase intersect with Western culture? How and why what does it say about a culture that would end a story with, and they lived happily ever after? Why is it that this phrase is so well known to Western audiences? What does that say about what a culture values, as an example? This second one sounds a lot like speech. Okay, well, let's turn the oven on first. So you could picture maybe a parent sharing this with a child. I could picture this maybe on a cooking show. Honestly, the written form, I could picture it in a blog nowadays. So a cooking blog, they've become so widespread and conversational. You could picture somebody maybe writing this as they're describing this particular recipe that they're sharing with you. And so then you have to ask, well, why is it that we talk through potentially the steps of baking with somebody? What is it that we're trying to do? So we're trying to pass on a particular skill and particular recipes, maybe that are nostalgic for us, that are important to us, that are made with foods that are local to us, that kind of thing. So that's one possible way that it intersects with culture in that way. And then this final one, the statement is, this leads to soil erosion. And this reminds me very much of a scientific explanation. I could picture it in writing or in speaking, in like a documentary form. I could picture it in a textbook. And so the bigger question is, why is it that we write down things or speak things related to the soil, related to processes of the earth. What does that say about what we as human beings value? And how might this look different in different parts of the globe? How might different people write about these processes differently? Right? So that's sort of an initial look at how these text fragments connect into bigger genres, okay? If we look down, then now it's taking those same snippets, fragments, and then connecting them into our bigger ideas of field, tenor, and mode. So field is the topic. So think of it as, what field are you in? Well, you all are in the field of education. That's the what of what you're studying. Someone else might be in the engineering field or the math field. And so in this case, our second one was about cooking, right? And so that would be the field, so cooking broadly. That's the what that it's about. And then the third one is, the third one is scientific, right? And so we could say specifically, I think, geology, science. Did your textbook? Yeah, your textbook suggested soil erosion and science. So, okay. So now, who is involved in creating the text? What kind of relationship is being created between the person that wrote it or spoke it, and then you as the receiver of that information? So in the second fragment that was about cooking, we decided, I'll scroll back up, we talked about how, or I guess I suggested that it's some sort of a conversation between somebody probably that knows more about baking and somebody that knows less. So we're setting up a little bit of an unequal relationship. These two people are not necessarily on the same plane of knowledge about a topic. So one person has more knowledge than the other, probably. Okay. Let me just check with what your book said. Did they add anything else? Okay. And then finally, with the geology example, it's again a pretty unequal relationship, right? So the assumption of the person that is writing is that they understand erosion and you potentially do not. And so they are not the reader, the writer is an expert sharing knowledge. And then finally, mode is, among other things, getting at the form that the text takes. Is it spoken? Is it written? Is it multimodal? And so the one that's cooking, we could picture it in multiple ways, but mostly in speaking. And even if it was written in a blog, it's meant to sound like speaking, right? Whereas fragment 3 is probably written, though if it was spoken in a documentary, it's meant to sound as if it is writing, right? Okay, so that's the idea here, is really just to think through the fact that texts don't live alone, that they're not just emergent from nothing. They come out, they're created by people, and people have purposes for writing them. And so as we're looking at texts, we want to think through, why is it that people are writing them? And who are they picturing as their audience? How are they trying to position that audience by what they're doing? Okay, there we go. Thank you.